Folks, there's just 24 days until Election Day, and Donald Trump can't stop lying on the campaign trail. But it's not his usual lies. He's lying about recovery and relief efforts from Hurricanes Milton and Helene. He's lying about migrant communities where Republican officials have rejected his accusations. And as our next guest, David Corn, writes, Trump is no longer running a political campaign. He's running a disinformation campaign.
Now America is known all throughout the world as occupied America. They call it occupied. We're being occupied by a criminal force. And we're an occupied state that refuses to let our great law enforcement professionals do the job that they so dearly want to do.
Politico reports that even some diehard Trump backers are worried about the long-term impact of these lies. Joining us now, Mother Jones Washington Bureau Chief and MSNBC political analyst David Corn and disinformation expert Nina Jankowicz. She's the author of How to Lose the Information War.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good morning to you both. You know, Nina, I watched that sound of the ex-president standing next to that image, and I'm reminded how he weaponizes anomalies in order to smear millions of innocent people, the danger that that poses uniquely to that community. Talk to me about the danger of Donald Trump spreading disinformation in this election, yes, but as a prelude to what would be a second term.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen a pattern of behavior from the former president that is, frankly, terrifying. He is keeping people from getting their aid from FEMA. He is spreading things about health disinformation. He is making sure that people are scared of their own neighbors in places like Aurora, Colorado. I mean, this isn't just about winning an election anymore. It is about pitting Americans against one another, making us less safe, making us less prosperous, and frankly, that should terrify every American voter.
You know, former President Barack Obama put this the best this week. Can we play him in Pittsburgh on Thursday talking about this very issue?
Now the people of Florida are dealing with another devastating storm. And I want you to watch what happens over the next few days, just like the last time. You're going to have leaders who try to help, and then you have a guy who will just lie about it to score political points, and this has consequences. Because people are afraid and they've lost everything, and now they're trying to figure out, how do I apply for help? And some of them may be discouraged from getting the help they need. The idea of intentionally trying to deceive people in their most desperate and vulnerable moments. And my question is, when did that become okay?
I mean, David, when did that become okay? Hitting the nail on the head. We, not us at the table, I think we collectively as like a people, Americans, oftentimes talk about disinformation and misinformation affecting low information voters, or, you know, people that, oh, maybe they just don't know any better. But I know a lot of people, very smart folks, y'all, who fell for the belief that there was only $750 that FEMA was providing residents who have been affected by the hurricanes. And we all know that, sitting at this table, that that's not true. But when the president of the United States of America has to stand up repeatedly this week and say, these are lies, stop it, I don't know why Donald Trump is doing this. And you got the press being like, well, you gonna call Donald Trump? No, Joe Biden is like, what? No, I ain't calling him. It is, well, there are many things at play here, David, but this is just not like, oh, you have to educate more people. Very smart people are falling for this misinformation and disinformation.
I know why Donald Trump does it. You know, those of us at the table and a lot of people out there for about a decade now have been trying to figure out why Donald Trump lies so deeply, so often, so much beyond the boundaries of even usual politicians and politics, which you've been involved with, Michael. It's not just spin. It's not just the lie that the other guy had a bad vote, you know, and he mischaracterized this, and I'm great, and I did all this stuff. What he's been doing is the essence of disinformation. He's trying to change how millions of Americans perceive reality. He wants to scare them. He puts up these false narratives time and time again, whether it's about the legal migrants of Haiti, whether it's about what's happening with FEMA, whether it's schools performing transition operations that don't happen, whether it's Democratic states executing babies after they're born, or when he says you can't cross the street without getting raped or mugged these days. And when he just said everybody in the world talks about occupied America. You know what? Nobody in the world talks about occupied America. It's not a thing. But he keeps promoting these false narratives to create a meta-narrative that the country is a hellhole, it's imperiled by barbarians who tend to be people of color, and that this is actually orchestrated purposefully by Democrats, by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that the only person who can save anyone is Donald Trump. So it's not just lying about specifics, it's lying to create this false reality. And once you start to do that, everything is an opportunity. So when FEMA and the hurricane comes along, that's another opportunity to promote this false reality. So he's not going to stop. And Barack Obama can try to call him out. Joe Biden can. I think they should even be harder. I think they should just stare at him and say, "You are a GD liar," and be that tough with him. Because if you don't cast him as the villain in this piece, the fire hose of lies will continue and continue, and good people, maybe not so good people, will believe some of this stuff because that bond has already been forged. He's been very successful in creating this false reality, which includes the big lie. It goes back to Mexican rapists when he first announced. And so I think, it needs a full frontal confrontation. And in some ways, the genie's out of the bottle on this.
So Nina, David just laid out expertly how this thing operates. Yeah. Donald Trump is a liar. He's a serial liar. His whole existence is built upon these various lies. I go back to the man who says he's 215 pounds, and y'all know he ain't.
That's why I put on my driver's license.
You know he's not. So if you're lying about your own self, lying to everybody else is easy, right? But here's the deal, and your organization reported on this this week. He has help. There are other constituencies out there. To David's point, some of those bad actors not just believe it, but like it and perpetuate it. The American Sunlight Project, ASP, has uncovered a decade-old global network of lightly automated accounts that exist to amplify Russian propaganda and other divisive content. Hundreds of accounts of the 1,187 ASP identified have evaded moderation and detection for years, and in some cases more than a decade. Yeah. So there's a backfilling reinforcement of, yes, the Haitians are eating the dogs and the cats, or FEMA is only going to give you $720 and that's it. So talk about that combo impact on the narratives that we're seeing play out in this election.
Yeah, so Russia, China, Iran, they play on our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities. And Donald Trump is just absolutely amplifying those vulnerabilities, giving them an easy thing to keep pushing, to polarize us further, to make us more concentrated on what's going on here at home so that we're not looking at what Russia, China, and Iran are doing abroad. And it's a lot, right? There's a lot of problems in the world right now. And they're just handing Trump a victory. And when we looked at these accounts, we've been keeping an eye on them for a long time. Just a note, Elon Musk, unsurprisingly, has not taken them down, despite them operating for so long and us being able to find them as a small organization fairly easily. This week, of course, they're amplifying hurricane disinformation. They're saying, here's a chopper that's crashing and destroying aid. Here's the way that FEMA is bungling all this stuff. And, I got to say, FEMA is doing yeoman's work. They are doing an incredible job. They should not have to be doing it. They are first responders. They're meant to be dealing with emergency assistance. They've had to become disinformation experts. And there was meant to be a bureau within DHS focusing on this that I was meant to lead.
I was about to say, this is why Nina should have a job, okay? Nina should be employed today in the federal government.
I'd be happy to work for her. You mentioned Elon Musk. It's not just he's not taking these things down. He is the number one disinformer after Donald Trump,
Spreading
even
it
more
himself,
so. And, you know,
absolutely.
he won't do interviews. He goes on Tucker Carlson. Hey, Elon Musk, you think you're a big free speech guy? Come on MSNBC. Talk to these guys. Talk to me, because he's out there amplifying the FEMA stuff.
Yeah.
He's amplifying the migrant stuff, and, you know, to hundreds of millions of people. So it's him, it's Fox News, it's the GOP that enables this. And you know what? It's the entire conservative movement that says Donald Trump's disinformation is okay, and they play into it.
Alicia, when the Secretary of Transportation has to pick up the phone and call Elon Musk to tell him what he is saying is a lie and can he please stop, it has just gone too far.
Indeed, and that's as it relates to governance. I have a question for you, David, about how it relates to the next 30 days or so, which is we often talk about how these campaigns are on an asymmetric playing field. And to your point, if Donald Trump isn't running a political campaign, he's running a disinformation campaign, what then is the antidote from the Harris campaign and from Democrats? Because we've all had these conversations, right? We're talking to someone who's been exposed to disinformation. You try to get out from under that disinformation. It's extraordinarily difficult.
Yep. You know, it is. You know, once this bond has been forged between Donald Trump and tens of millions of people, I think the media over the last, decade has done a terrible job of providing the context and the framing for Donald Trump. They've given him too many platforms, showing him live, and often both sides of the issue. He says this, but others say that, and they haven't contextualized him as this grand disinformationalist. It's probably too late to do that now. So I think whether it's Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, I think they just need to pull out all the stops in accusing him of harming people with these lies, whether it's in Ohio, whether it's in North Carolina, and just not, beat around the bush about it. I think just really taking it to him and making him respond. Don't respond to the lies, respond to him.
Bingo. Bingo. Bingo.
Boom. Hit the nail. That's me hitting the nail.